Today's conversation was really powerful. Today is a reminder of the work I need to do in my community to continue to educate and help build those allies and relationships so my community feels accepted.
I thought the conversation was great. I think this is a conversation that needs to happen. I think it needs to keep happening, and it's one that needs to happen in a bigger public setting.
The question is really around civil rights law. Are there places where folks are not abiding by civil rights laws? And I think one of those areas that we see these kinds of issues pop up is when schools try to prevent students from forming gay-straight alliances. But I do think that's an area where litigation or the threat of litigation can be very helpful, honestly, in ensuring that students have those safe places where they can share their experiences and they can get some protection from the prospects of bullying.
The idea of a shelter is new to me. This is one of these ideas whose time has come and is past time, but I had no idea of the need. And it, you know, when you think about it, it's so logical, and yet until you're really faced with people living through those kinds of issues of homelessness because of their identity, you don't connect the dots yourself, and so I need a lot of dot connecting myself here.
What I hope people learn from watching this show today is that they learn how at risk our LGBT youth are and some of the needs that they have, and then there's some simple things they can do to be an ally.
I always supported Brian, going way back to when he was a little boy. And I'm grateful that I stood by him, because he wouldn't be where he is today without that support.
Join us for Public Square on the last Thursday of every month, and visit our website. That's where you can see an update on a topic we explored last year, opiate addiction. Watch an interview with Mayor Richard J. Barry and Jennifer Weiss, founder of the Heroin Awareness Committee.
I've been to a number of high schools when we have the student assemblies, and I know that we've had students come up after those presentations and talk to people and say, I need some help today.
Right.
And so
what can you tell them when they say that? Like, look, I mean, what's their option when they come up and say, I need help now? So
if people need some help, you know, there are resources available. If you just want to call City Hall, call the mayor's office. We'll get you in touch with the right people.
Okay.
Tell them you saw the mayor on this program and that you know someone that needs a hand. We don't provide the services through the mayor's office, but we'll be a bridge and a conduit for people to get the help that they need.
Go to newmexicopbs.org and look for Public Square under Local Productions. Here you can give us feedback or suggest topics. Also, look for us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching.